What if I told you some of the sweetest, juiciest, and healthiest fruits aren't new hybrids or store-bought imports? They're the old-fashioned gems Grandma once grew right in her backyard. Today, we're diving into 20 forgotten fruits she harvested and why these timeless treasures deserve a comeback. Number 20. Serviceberry, Juneberry. Grandma always called them Juneberries, and they were the first sweet taste of summer in her backyard. These small, deep purple fruits grew on slender trees lining the old garden fence. Every June, she'd pick handfuls to scatter over morning oatmeal or bake into bubbling pies that perfumed the whole kitchen. Their flavor was like a blend of blueberry and almond, delicate, rich, and unforgettable. Serviceberries weren't just delicious, they were practical. The trees provided quick shade, bird food, and endless bowls of fruit without any fuss. But over time, these hardy trees vanished from neighborhoods, replaced by decorative shrubs that never fed anyone. Today, hardly anyone knows what serviceberry is, but back then, they were a dependable backyard treasure that marked the start of warm days, pies cooling on the windowsill, and simpler living. Number 19. Chickasaw plum. Grandma probably called them wild plums, but Chickasaw plums were more than a roadside find. These small, tart fruits grew on thicket-forming trees that lined old farm fields and the edges of homesteads. Every spring, their branches burst with tiny white flowers, attracting bees by the hundreds before setting fruit in summer. The plums themselves were no bigger than a large marble, with thin red skins and juicy, sour flesh. Grandma used to gather baskets full, cooking them down into rich plum butter or jewel-toned jelly that brightened the winter pantry. They didn't need pampering. Drought, sandy soil, and poor care, none of it bothered these native trees. That's why they spread so easily across southern landscapes. Today, few people plant them, forgetting how one small plum can carry the taste of wild sweetness and memories of barefoot summers spent picking along dusty fence lines. Number 18. Ground cherry. Grandma always had ground cherries tucked away in a quiet corner of the garden. These little golden fruits, wrapped in papery husks like tiny lanterns, were a secret treat for kids who knew where to look. Often called husk tomatoes, they taste like a cross between pineapple and sweet tomato, with a hint of vanilla. Ground cherries thrived in neglected spots, loving the heat and growing low to the ground on sprawling stems. Your grandparents would gather handfuls for pies, jams, and preserves, or simply snack on them fresh while tending other plants. They were easy to grow, tolerant of poor soil, and didn't ask for much water. Despite their resilience and unique tropical flavor, ground cherries have faded from modern gardens, replaced by store-bought fruits that can't match their old-fashioned sweetness and nostalgic charm. Number 17. Muscadine grapes. Grandma's backyard was never complete without muscadine vines curling around a rusty old arbor. Native to the southeastern United States, muscadines thrived in hot, humid summers and poor soils. These grapes weren't dainty like the store-bought varieties. Their skins were thick, and their flavor was rich, sweet, and slightly musky. You could hear their skins pop between your teeth before the juicy burst flooded your mouth with that unmistakable taste of late summer. Grandma turned them into jams, jellies, and homemade wines that warmed the family through winter. She loved them because muscadines didn't fuss over pests or diseases. They were tough, reliable, and long-lived, producing pounds of grapes each season with just a bit of pruning. Today, they're hard to find outside old southern homesteads, but back then, they were the pride of the trellis and a reminder of simple, enduring abundance. Number 16. Persimmon. Grandma's backyard often had a persimmon tree standing quietly at the edge of the orchard or near the old chicken coop. These bright orange fruits ripened in late autumn, turning so soft they looked like tiny golden jelly bombs ready to burst. She would wait for the first frost to mellow their bitter tannins before picking them, then use their sweet, honey-like flesh in puddings and cakes, or simply spoon them straight from their skins as an evening treat. The trees themselves were tough and undemanding, thriving even in poor soil and dry weather. Their glossy green leaves turned fiery in fall, adding beauty to the garden year-round. Yet, you barely see them anymore outside specialty markets. Bring back persimmons, and you're not just planting fruit. You're reviving a sweet, silky bite of old homestead tradition. Number 15. Pocket melon. These curious little melons went by many names: plum grannies, Queen Anne's pocket melons, or simply pocket melons. They weren't grown for eating like cantaloupes or watermelons, though technically you could. Instead, their main purpose was scent. Grandpa might have planted them near the porch steps, but Grandma picked the small, striped fruits and tucked them into dresser drawers or coat pockets to perfume linens and clothes. When ripe, they gave off a rich, sweet fragrance that filled an entire room with the scent of summer. Visually, they looked like miniature cantaloupes with bright orange flesh and patterned rinds, but their taste was bland, almost cucumber-like. In the 1800s and early 1900s, every farmhouse garden had a few vines climbing the fence. Today, they've all but disappeared, leaving behind memories of a time when nature's perfume came in the form of a tiny decorative fruit. Number 14. Seckel pear. Grandma called them sugar pears for a reason. The seckel pear was tiny compared to regular pears, fitting perfectly in a child's palm, but each bite packed an intense honey-sweet flavor with a hint of spice. Originating in Pennsylvania in the 1700s, seckel pears became a staple in American backyards. They were tough trees, able to handle cold winters, and their compact size made them easy to care for, even in smaller gardens. Grandma often canned them whole in spiced syrup or tucked them into lunch pails for a sweet treat at school. When fresh, their crisp bite was refreshing on hot days. But what truly made them special was their long storage life. She'd wrap them in paper and keep them in the root cellar, pulling them out for holiday desserts long after other fruits had vanished. Number 13. Black raspberry. Black raspberries were once the pride of Grandma's berry rows. Not to be confused with blackberries, these small, deep purple fruits had a sweet, rich flavor that carried hints of wild honey. They grew on arching canes, often tucked along fence lines or beside tool sheds, where their thorny stems were left to sprawl. Your grandparents picked them early in summer for jams, syrups, or fresh eating, their hands stained with the dark juice. Black raspberries thrived in partial shade and poor soils where other berries struggled. They were tougher than red raspberries and packed with nutrients, making them a backyard medicine chest as well as a dessert staple. Today, you'd be lucky to spot them at a farmer's market. Their short shelf life and fragile fruit meant they never fit into the supermarket system, but they sure fit perfectly into Grandma's garden. Number 12. Medlar. Medlars were the fruit that puzzled every curious grandchild. Sitting in Grandma's pantry, they looked like tiny brown apples, wrinkled and soft, almost spoiled. But that was exactly how she wanted them. Medlars had to be left to over-ripen until their flesh turned into a sweet, spiced applesauce-like treat. Grandma would scoop out their soft insides with a spoon and spread them over warm toast or mix them into her winter pies for a rich, tangy depth no modern fruit could match. Medlars were once a prized fruit across old American and European homesteads, valued for ripening when little else did in late autumn. But as supermarkets favored picture-perfect apples, medlars faded away. Few people today even know their name, let alone their taste. For Grandma, though, medlars were a final sweet goodbye to the harvest season. Number 11. Arkansas black apple. If Grandma had an apple tree out back, chances are it included the Arkansas Black. These apples were unlike any you find on shelves today. They had dark, almost purple-red skin, so firm they could clink like stones in your palm. When first picked, they were crisp and tart, but after a few weeks in storage, they turned sweeter, developing rich notes almost like spiced wine. That's why Grandma stored them through winter, wrapped in old newspapers and lined up in wooden crates in the cellar. This heirloom apple wasn't for quick snacking. It was for pies that needed structure, cider presses that needed depth, and fresh eating on frosty mornings when their sugars peaked. Modern growers skip them for softer varieties, but to Grandma, the Arkansas Black was the taste of autumn, preserved long after the leaves fell. Number 10. Black Diamond, Watermelon. Nothing said summer at Grandma's place quite like the Black Diamond watermelon. These massive fruits, with their thick, dark green rinds, grew heavy and round in backyard patches, sometimes tipping the scale at over 50 pounds. Their bright red flesh was crisp, sweet, and juicy, the kind of watermelon that dripped down your chin and stained your shirt. Grandma planted them in wide, sunny rows, letting the vines sprawl over every inch of available ground. The Black Diamond was tougher than modern varieties, resisting pests and tolerating dry spells better. At family gatherings, Grandma would slice through its dense rind with a heavy knife, revealing glistening ruby wedges that everyone dove into. Today, they're rare in stores, replaced by smaller seedless types, but those who remember them still crave that old-fashioned flavor that screamed real summer watermelon. Number 9. Prickly Pear Cactus. Grandma knew the prickly pear cactus wasn't just a desert decoration. She'd harvest the bright pink oval fruits with thick gloves to avoid their hair-like spines. Once peeled, the juicy flesh inside was sweet and subtly melon-like, perfect for making jelly, syrup, or even candy. Some families also use the cactus pads, called no-pails, slicing and frying them into tangy, vitamin-rich dishes. The prickly pear cactus thrived in poor, dry soils, making it an essential fruit for homesteads in the Southwest. It needed almost no water and resisted deer, drought, and pests with ease. When other crops failed under the blistering sun, prickly pear stood tall, offering food and resilience. For Grandma, it wasn't exotic or unusual. It was a reliable, nutritious fruit that turned the harshest corners of her garden into a sweet reward. Number 8. Beach Plum. Beach plums were Grandma's hidden treasure, gathered during family trips to the windy shores. Growing wild along the sandy dunes of the Northeast, these tiny purplish plums hid among thorny branches, waiting to be plucked at peak ripeness. Their flesh was tart and juicy, with a flavor that brightened up Grandma's pantry. She'd haul baskets of them back home to turn them into jewel-toned jelly and rich plum syrup that sweetened winter breakfasts. Beach plums were also baked into rustic pies, their tang cutting through the buttery crust with every bite. Back then, families saw them as free coastal gold, a fruit that thrived without an orchard. Today, development has swallowed many of their habitats, and hardly anyone remembers these salty sweet fruits of the seaside. But for Grandma, beach plums tasted like warm sand, summer winds, and the freedom of gathering what nature offered. Number 7. Nanking Cherries. Grandma's yard always had a row of Nanking cherry bushes, their branches drooping with clusters of bright red fruit by early summer. These cherries weren't like the sour ones you find in stores. They were small, sweet tart, and perfect for popping into your mouth on the walk back from the garden. Grandma often scooped them up by the bucket, cooking them into jewel-toned jams that lined her pantry shelves. The shrubs themselves were hardy, able to survive freezing winters without complaint, and in spring they bloomed with delicate pink flowers that bees adored. Nowadays, people rarely plant them, opting instead for ornamental bushes with no fruit. But back then, Nanking cherries meant a promise of summer sweetness, something to turn into jam, syrup, or pie long before you could ever buy fruit year-round at the store. Number 6. Strawberry tree, Arbutus. This strawberry tree isn't the strawberry plant you're thinking of. This small evergreen tree, often called arbutus, was once planted for both beauty and harvest. Grandma's yard might have had one near the porch, its glossy green leaves and peeling cinnamon-colored bark adding charm through every season. Come fall, it produced clusters of round, bumpy red fruits that looked like strawberries but tasted lightly sweet and somewhat bland, almost like a mild fig. While not eaten fresh as often, these fruits were cooked into jams or homemade liqueurs to bring out their subtle flavors. Birds adored them too, flocking to the branches during cold months. Strawberry trees were hardy and easy to grow, requiring little care beyond a sunny spot. Today, they're rare to see in American gardens, but old gardeners remembered them as living ornaments that fed both family and wildlife. Number 5. Crab apple. Crab apples were a staple in Grandma's orchard, planted not just for their fruit, but for their sheer beauty each spring. These little trees burst into bloom with white or pink blossoms, buzzing with bees and promising a harvest of small, tart fruits by late summer. Your grandparents used crab apples in so many ways. They boiled them down into rich jellies, pickled them whole for tangy preserves, or cooked them with cinnamon and sugar into rosy sauces for pork roasts. Some varieties were sweet enough to bite straight into while working in the garden, their flesh crisp and mouth-puckering. The trees themselves were tough, thriving in poor soils and harsh winters. Today, crab apples are mostly forgotten, seen as ornamental rather than edible. But Grandma knew better. These trees offered food, beauty, and pollination support for every other fruit tree in the yard. Number 4. White mulberry. White mulberries used to be everywhere, dotting backyards and country roads with their pale, sugary berries. Originally brought to America for silkworm farming, these trees quickly won over families like Grandma's due to their sweet fruit. Kids would often climb up the sturdy branches to grab handfuls of soft, juicy berries that stained their fingers and filled their pockets. Grandma would spread them over pies or mash them into a quick jam for morning toast. The fruit tasted like honey, mixed with melon, light and refreshing, perfect for sticky summer afternoons. But as cities expanded and silkworm dreams faded, these trees were chopped down or left to grow wild by highways. Today, few remember that these once fed families for free. For Grandma, white mulberries were a sweet, secret snack. Number 3. Dewberries. Before cultivated blackberries filled grocery shelves, there were dewberries. These wild fruits crawled low across fence lines and fields, sending out thorny vines that clung to the ground rather than climbing upward. Grandma would gather them barefoot on misty mornings, her apron stained with deep purple juice, by breakfast. Dewberries looked like smaller blackberries, with slightly shinier skin and softer, juicier flesh. Their flavor was deeper, too sweet, but with an earthy, almost wine-like undertone that made pies, jams, and cobblers taste unforgettable. They ripened earlier than blackberries, often appearing in late spring, which made them a prized early harvest. Dewberries needed almost no care, just a patch of sunlit soil at the edge of the garden. Today, you'd be lucky to find a handful growing wild, but their taste remains burned into the memory of old farm kitchens. Number 2. Concord grape. Few fruits bring back backyard memories like Concord grapes. These deep purple clusters grew along Grandma's fences or sagging wooden arbors, filling the yard with their sweet, tangy scent each late summer. Grandma turned them into jelly for fresh-baked bread, juice so rich it stained your lips purple, or even small batches of homemade wine for special days. Concord grapes weren't like the bland grocery store grapes today. They had thick skins that popped and a bold, almost wild flavor that lingered. Thriving in cooler northern states, they were a true American homestead staple. One bite transported you straight back to the porch swing, barefoot, eating grapes right off the vine under the late August sun. Number 1. Thimbleberry. Grandma's berry patch often hid a secret sweeter than raspberries: thimbleberries. These wild, bright red berries grew on leafy bushes along woodland edges and fence lines, their soft, velvety fruit melting on the tongue with a honey-sweet finish. Thimbleberries were too delicate for market shelves, bruising at the slightest touch, so only those who picked them fresh knew their flavor. Grandma gathered them into pies, spread them into vivid jams, or simply popped them fresh into her mouth while tending the garden. The bushes didn't need much care, thriving in partial shade with moist soil and spreading into lush thickets over time. Birds loved them too, so Grandma often raced the robins to harvest her share. Today, thimbleberries remain a hidden treasure of old homesteads, almost never seen but always remembered for their wild, fleeting sweetness. And that's it for today's journey through Grandma's forgotten fruits. If you enjoyed this trip down memory lane, don't forget to subscribe for more stories like these. See you in the next video.